Just a few weeks ago, the United States declared the military takeover in Niger as a coup. According to the US Constitution, the US cannot establish relations or offer aid to a country that has experienced a coup. As a result, $500 million in aid to Niger was suspended. This raised questions about why the US took so long to make this decision. Some speculate that the US did so after pressure from France. However, suspending aid also posed a challenge for the US military and its drone-based presence in Niger. It seemed difficult to cut aid and still maintain a military presence there. Earlier, there were reports suggesting that the US might be preparing to withdraw from Niger, including its drone base and all ties. However, a recent event in the US Senate shed light on the US elite's thinking. Senator Rand Paul presented a resolution in the Senate that called for the withdrawal of US troops from Niger. The voting on this resolution surprised many and revealed the true intentions of the US regarding Niger. But what exactly happened in the Senate, and how is the US plotting against Niger? Recently, the US Senate rejected Senator Rand Paul's proposal to withdraw US troops from Niger after the military coup. The resolution faced a significant defeat with only 5 Republicans, 4 Democrats, and independent Senator Bernie Sanders supporting Senator Paul's position. His measure aimed to direct President Joe Biden to withdraw all US troops from Niger within 30 days, invoking Congress's war powers as outlined in the US Constitution. The resolution highlighted that as of June, the US had over 1,000 troops in Niger, making it the second largest US military presence on the African continent. Senator Paul criticized President Biden for relying on post-9/11 war powers to justify the troop presence in Niger, arguing that it did not align with the situation in Africa. The Senate's rejection of the legislation, with a vote of 86 to 11, indicates an ongoing US military imperialism in Niger despite the recent coup. Although the US formally recognized the military coup in Niger and suspended official assistance, there have been no indications of plans to modify the US troop presence in the country. Niger has been crucial in the US fight against Islamist insurgents in Africa, hosting around 1,000 Department of Defense personnel. However, Senator Paul expressed concerns about the deployment of these troops without proper congressional approval and the potential risks to American lives in the conflict in Niger. He questioned the reasoning behind maintaining over 1,000 troops in Niger, especially in a country governed by a military regime. Senator Ben Cardin, the Democratic chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, warned against a sudden withdrawal of US troops from Niger. He expressed concerns that such a move could create a power vacuum that might be filled by Russia or its partner, Wagner mercenaries. It seems like they are playing a hypocritical role. On one hand, the US labels it as a coup in Niger, while on the other hand, it pretends to care about the security situation. Senator Cardin emphasized the importance of paying more attention to the region and avoiding signals of abandonment. However, the reality is that the US does not want to be forced out. Over the past decade, US troops have been involved in training Nigerian forces in counter-terrorism and operating military bases for conducting drone missions. But it's clear that these missions have benefited the US more than Niger, providing valuable intelligence about the continent. Despite officially acknowledging the military coup in Niger and suspending assistance, US officials have shown no intention of adjusting the presence of US troops in the country. It's evident that we don't give enough attention to this part of the world. We certainly don't want to signal that we are abandoning it, as stated by Ben Cardin. It's interesting how they discuss Africa and its countries as if they are entitled to be there and maintain a military presence, making decisions about these matters in their Senate. However, the reality is that discussions about such matters should take place in Niger itself, allowing the country to decide whether US troops should be removed or not. This contradicts what the US did earlier when it officially recognized the military takeover in Niger as a coup, imposing limitations on military aid and collaboration with a country considered a crucial counter-terrorism ally in the region. A senior Biden administration official explained that they took this action after exhausting all available avenues to preserve constitutional order in Niger over the past 2 months. However, the available options for resolving the situation in Niger were not aimed at finding a solution, but rather at ensuring the return of Mohamed Bazoum to the presidency. The Niger military junta was not willing to take direct orders in that manner. As a result, the US attempted to blackmail the junta by threatening to cut off aid. When the Niger military junta ignored these threats, the US had no choice but to end the aid. An official mentioned that the US had urged the military leaders responsible for forcibly removing the president from power to reinstate a civilian and democratic government within the time frame mandated by Niger's constitution, 90,120 days. However, the military officials did not adhere to these constitutional guidelines. In fact, they informed the US that they had chosen to repeal the constitution and were in the process of creating a new draft with an uncertain timeline. Currently, the US Embassy can continue its operations, and the US military has decided to maintain forces in Niger, as stated by administration officials. However, the US is refraining from participating in any joint missions or training with Nigerian forces, a practice that has been in effect since the coup took place in late July. Approximately 1,000 US personnel are still stationed in the country, but decisions regarding their continued presence have not been finalized. Intelligence, reconnaissance, and surveillance operations through US drones are ongoing. The official noted that these activities primarily focus on monitoring threats to US forces, including those posed by violent extremist organizations. There are concerns among current and former US officials that the limited intelligence, reconnaissance, and surveillance efforts could hinder international initiatives to support local security forces in combating terrorist organizations. Niger has been a key location for counter-terrorism operations in West Africa, with the US investing millions in a drone base in Agadez that started operating in 2019. France also withdrew its 1,500 troops from Niger and terminated its cooperation with the Nigerian military in response to the coup. The French ambassador also left the country. When the Biden administration officially designated the July military takeover in Niger as a coup, it enabled the US to take measures to restrict most forms of assistance to the Nigerian government. A total of $200 million in US aid, which had been on hold since August, is now suspended. The State Department spokesperson, Matthew Miller, stated that any resumption of US assistance would require action by the military junta to establish democratic governance within a reasonable timeframe. Following the official acknowledgement of the coup, rumors began to circulate about the potential withdrawal of US troops from Niger. The United States started considering the possibility of withdrawing up to half of the 1,100 troops stationed in Niger. But a final decision had not yet been made, and the exact number of troops to be withdrawn remained uncertain. Despite the military coup, the US maintained its military presence in Niger, with troops stationed at 2 air bases and the embassy in Niamey. The relocation of troops from Airbase 101 to Airbase 2011 near Agadez was driven by capacity issues. However, the smaller capacity of Airbase 2011, which operates drones, poses challenges and could potentially lead to the departure of some troops from the country. Reports suggest that the withdrawal of troops could begin in the coming weeks, depending on the conditions on the ground. Nonetheless, the Pentagon's objective is to maintain a military presence in Niger for as long as possible. Recent reports suggest that the Biden administration has been considering options to keep US forces and assets in Niger for anti-terror operations, despite the uncertain political situation. Plans are underway to remove non-essential personnel and contractors, and the relocation of some troops has been coordinated with the Nigerian military. The US government emphasizes that there is currently no immediate threat to US personnel or violence on the ground. However, preparations have been made for a worst-case scenario, including the potential evacuation of US military from Niger. Although a final decision is still weeks away, preparations for various scenarios have been initiated, according to General James Hecker, the commander of U.S. Air Forces Europe and U.S. Air Forces Africa. General Hecker stated that U.S. troops stationed at 2 crucial air bases for counterterrorism efforts are ready to leave Niger if necessary. He highlighted the importance of being prepared for different hypothetical situations that could arise. U.S. officials have been cautioning for weeks that Washington might withdraw support for Niger if the military officials who ousted President Mohamed Bazoum failed to reinstate him. However, the U.S. has refrained from officially labeling the situation in Niger as a coup, as it could have significant implications for the existing military partnership. Airbase 2011, a U.S.-built facility that cost $110 million, has played a vital role in the counterterrorism mission by conducting drone flights with MQ-9 Reapers since 2019. General Hecker emphasized that planning for a potential evacuation from the 2 bases is a prudent and precautionary measure. The teams have considered scenarios where they may need to evacuate civilians and even the U.S. Embassy under duress. Additionally, preparations are underway for alternative bases for U.S. air assets in case they need to leave Niger. General Hecker mentioned that they have started exploring potential partnerships with other allies in West Africa for alternative bases, and decisions regarding these bases will be coordinated through the State Department. It is evident that the U.S. aims to maintain a military presence in Africa, regardless of the specific country involved. The use of drone bases allows the U.S. to carry out surveillance missions and gather valuable intelligence, which is highly prized. This intelligence provides an advantage to the U.S. and is considered more valuable than resources like gold and diamonds. The U.S. intensified its evacuation planning in response to the new junta in Niger. Precautionary measures were being taken to prepare for a potential evacuation of 2 important drone and counter-terrorism bases in Niger, as announced by Air Force General James Hecker, the commander for Africa. This indicated that the U.S. had no intention of leaving, but the evacuation plan depended on orders from the Niger military junta. In addition, the U.S. began making plans to explore alternatives and establish alliances with friendly nations in the Sahara and Sahel regions, which are known for high extremist group activity. General Hecker clarified that, as of now, the Biden administration had not decided whether the military overthrow of Niger's democratically elected president would lead to the evacuation of U.S. diplomats or security forces from the country. The U.S. bases in Niger, located in the capital city of Niamey and the remote city of Agadez on the southern edge of the Sahara, have played a crucial role in counter-terrorism efforts in a volatile region facing increasing coups and encroachment by Russia's Wagner mercenary group. General Hecker acknowledged that if U.S. forces were to depart due to an administration decision or junta orders, it would have implications for U.S. intelligence and counter-terrorism efforts. However, he expressed hope for a peaceful diplomatic resolution to avoid such a situation. Specific details about alternative counter-terrorism posts in West Africa were not provided by General Hecker, emphasizing that diplomatic considerations would heavily influence the decision-making process. Hecker's precautionary evacuation planning includes different scenarios, such as a gradual and a rapid departure, with a focus on transporting sensitive materials. Subsequent reports confirmed the credibility of these plans, as the Pentagon announced the repositioning of troops and military equipment within Niger. The United States has started moving specific troops and military equipment from Airbase 100 and 1 near Niger's capital to Airbase 2000 and 1 in Agadez, a facility located in central Niger where intelligence and reconnaissance missions are conducted. Despite the suspension of these missions since the coup, the U.S. has maintained its military presence in Niger until now. This relocation is a precautionary measure and does not indicate a significant change in the overall number of U.S. military personnel in the country. However, it does reflect a shift in the U.S. plans in Niger due to the coup. It is possible that the US troops were moved away from Niger's capital to avoid any potential confrontations. The coordination of troop and equipment relocation between the two bases, which are over 450 miles apart, was done in collaboration with the Nigerian military. While the US had previously engaged in extensive training and exercises with the Nigerian military, such cooperation has been suspended since the coup. However, later on, there were different developments that emerged. It was reported that the US military has resumed drone and crewed aircraft operations following the coup in Niger. Initially designed for surveillance drones in 2014, the Agadez base in Niger faced the potential loss due to the political turmoil. However, the base has evolved over time and now hosts advanced Reaper drones, making it the largest facility of its kind in Africa. The Agadez drone base, officially known as Nigerian Air Base 201, played a crucial role in the expanded US military presence in Africa. Unlike many other drone bases in the region, Agadez required the construction of comprehensive infrastructure from scratch, as there were no existing facilities. This initiative stands as the largest man-made project in the history of the US Air Force. Apart from its operational center, the base includes well-equipped facilities with recreational amenities and accommodations for personnel, resembling typical US installations. It has become evident that the US has no intention of leaving Niger on its own. The US Senate has expressed its explicit desire to maintain troops in Niger, creating an apparent inconsistency in the US decision to suspend aid to the country following the coup, while retaining its military presence. This move can be seen as a strategic maneuver, reflecting a sophisticated approach by the US to balance its security interests with the promotion of democracy. However, it has drawn criticism for disrespecting not only the US Congress, but also undermining democratic principles in favor of security considerations. The suspension of aid by the US aligns with its commitment to promoting democracy globally. When a coup disrupts a democratically elected government, the aid suspension sends a clear message that the US values democratic principles. However, there is a question of hypocrisy regarding why the US doesn't evacuate a country affected by a coup if it truly honors democratic ideals. The Niger military junta will handle this balancing act between aid suspension and the US military presence. The decision to suspend aid reflects the US rhetoric in support of democratic norms, showing a willingness to oppose undemocratic power changes. On the other hand, maintaining a military presence highlights the US habit of having a military presence regardless of the circumstances. However, this may not continue as the US has exhausted its leverage against the Niger military junta. Now, it will be Niger's turn to respond, potentially by ordering the US troops to leave and taking control of the two bases the US holds in the country. While the US Senate has expressed its desires and rejected resolutions to recall troops from Niger, the ultimate power lies with the Niger military junta. They are planning to ask the US to leave, as evidenced by the redeployment and repositioning of US troops. This situation has exposed the hypocrisy of the US, as it appears to use the suspension of aid as a form of blackmail while advocating for security in Africa when it comes to its military presence. The script raises the question of whether it is hypocritical for the US to end aid but continue to have a military presence in Niger. It ponders whether the Niger military junta should kick out US troops and take over the drone base, regardless of the decisions made by the US Senate. The audience is invited to share their thoughts on the perceived hypocrisy of the US in its actions in Africa.